Good day, ladies and gentlemen. Our program will begin in just a moment.
Oh, that's better.
Good day, ladies and gentlemen. Our program will begin in just a moment. Good day. Welcome to Advocacy Anywhere, powered by AJC. Advocacy Anywhere is AJC's digital platform that enables you to engage with AJC's global expertise, content, and advocacy from wherever you are. Today's program is brought to you in partnership with Jewish Insider. You can sign up for Jewish Insider's daily kickoff by visiting www.jewishinsider.com. We are delighted to be joined today by Congresswoman Nita Lowey of New York and Congressman Jeff Fortenberry of Nebraska for a bipartisan conversation on the Middle East Partnership for Peace Act, an initiative aimed at building new partnerships between Israeli and Palestinian business leaders and civil society organizations. Moderating this conversation is Julie Raymond, AJC Deputy Director of Policy and Diplomatic Affairs. After we hear from Julie and our esteemed guests, we will take your questions. You may email your question to questions@ajc.org. That's questions plural, or use the Q&A chat feature in Zoom. Julie, you have the floor.
Thank you so much. And thank you, Congresswoman Lowey and Congressman Fortenberry, for being with us today. As you both know well, this legislation is extremely important to AJC, and it's something that we've been pushing for a number of years. Throughout our history, AJC's worked to build bridges between Israelis and Palestinians, believing that cooperation is essential to regional security and a two-state solution. We've established several business economic development task forces to improve the West Bank economy and to improve Israeli-Palestinian business cooperation. On our semi-annual missions to the region, in addition to going to Israel and regularly Egypt and Jordan, we also are always going to the West Bank. For 37 years, AJC's Project Interchange has connected Israeli and global leaders to encourage collaboration and build partnerships. Roughly 6,000 alumni of AJC's Project Interchange have been not just Jerusalem and Tel Aviv on these educational seminars, but also Ramallah and other parts of the West Bank. Like the legislation we're discussing today, we know that people-to-people collaboration and joint economic ventures can bring hope to a struggling region, and we're excited to discuss it today with you. Congressman Fortenberry, I'd like to start with you. You've been the lead Republican on this bill since the beginning, not just during this Congress, but in previous congressional sessions as well. Can you tell us really what was the genesis for the Middle East Partnership for Peace Act, and how did this all come together?
Well, first of all, let me thank you so much for hosting today, and everyone that's listening. Your remarks, Julie, were very spot on and learned and wise. Let me thank my chair, Nita Lowey, as well for her long service in Congress, as well as leadership of appropriations. Look, we're on opposite sides of the political aisle, but appropriations is one of those places where people know the work has to get done, and there is robust dialogue, debate, intense at times, late hours. And through it all, Ms. Lowey handles herself with extraordinary professionalism, grace, and style, and is willing to listen to ideas that may not be her own. And when she decided to take up the leadership on behalf of the majority of this interesting idea, I just told her I raised the window and we began to wave the flag, because I was so excited to have such a capable partner in her who has dedicated herself to leadership in the Middle East, to trying to lean into the most vexing problems. To the heart of your question, though, it's a vexing problem. And a while back, it just simply dawned on me, a roadmap to peace, before there's a road, there has to be a foundation to the road. In other words, there's preconditions that have to be laid down, which create the means for trust, interactivity, interdependence, dialogue, and then finally movement on mission sets. So in recognizing that, again, the ideas of peace were extraordinary and well-intended, but we keep spinning, trying to get there, and thinking through, again, the preconditions for better understanding and the possibility of solidarity. First, starting with traditional exchange, people to people, as we call it traditionally, but then also using the new tools that we have, particularly in development finance, to actually engage in projects that get the possibility of healthy prosperity and, again, mutual linkages. when people are invested at that level, there's an upward movement to the political levels, government levels, to try to sustain health and well-being for all people. So that's the genesis of the idea. But again, thank you as well for your leadership and continuing to create the preconditions here at home in which this could be understood. One more final comment before I stop. I want to change the name, and I'm glad Ms. Lowey might be listening to this, of development finance to development diplomacy. Development finance has a feel of the transaction. To move past the transaction, important as that is, it's the gateway, but the gateway to relationships. And let's say market or an initiative or a project, and therefore profits flowing out of it lead to the outcome we want to see, which is enhanced relationship, then it just becomes a transaction. So that's why I want to potentially introduce this term development, diplomatic finance or development diplomacy as a part of this ongoing discussion. And we'll continue to refine those ideas, particularly around agriculture, which is so essential to the well-being of people. And of course, it means a tremendous amount to where I live as an agricultural state. But I'll stop there, and thank you so much for the dialogue.
Thank you. Congresswoman, as the chair of the Appropriations Committee, you have a really special and unique understanding of how U.S. aid and investment affects our interests abroad. Can you speak to aid to the Palestinians, the cutoff that we saw a few years ago, and why it's important as a member of Congress who cares really deeply about the state of Israel to support this type of aid to the region?
Thank you. First of all, it's such a pleasure to take part in today's virtual discussion alongside my good friend and fellow appropriator, Congressman Fortenberry. I only wish we could be meeting in person, but I hope that you and your loved ones are all safe and well. Today's event is yet another example of how we are all adapting to a new reality while finding innovative ways to continue our vital work. And I want to thank you, each of you, for what you're doing to continue to advance the U.S.-Israel relationship. As you know, Congress has to get a lot done between now and the end of the year, and no one feels the ticking clock more than I do. I've often said I couldn't leave Congress until Middle East peace was achieved between Israel and the Palestinians. And it really breaks my heart to be leaving at a time when we are nowhere close to that reality. And that's why it's so important for me to include the Middle East Partnership for Peace Act of 2020 in the FY 2021 State and Foreign Operations Appropriations Bill, which passed the House this summer. You may remember, and all who are listening, that this is the bill that Congressman Fortenberry and I introduced last year, and I'm so grateful for your continued leadership, my friend, and partnership on this. This Congress, we've worked very hard to make the bill even better by expanding the scope of its programs as well as congressional oversight. The legislation will authorize $50 million for each of the 5 fiscal years after enactment to be divided between USAID and the new Development Finance Corporation. USAID will expand the people-to-people exchanges and reconciliation programs they've been overseeing for decades, both between Israelis and Palestinians, as well as Arab Israelis and Jewish Israelis. And the bill will set up a 13-member advisory board appointed by the Congress to make recommendations to USAID. And the DFC will start providing investments in small and medium-sized enterprises that contribute to the Palestinian private sector economy and in projects that increase economic cooperation between Israelis and Palestinians. Let's make it very clear. As my friend and I know, it may not solve all the problems in the region. I cannot retire from the Congress without ensuring, however, that there is funding for people on the ground who want to come together and make progress in their communities on peaceful coexistence, reconciliation, and economic cooperation. And The American Jewish Committee has been an absolutely tremendous partner on this effort. With all of your help, I know we can get it passed by the Senate and signed into law. Thank you.
Thank you, Congresswoman. I want to sort of double down on what you said and ask Congressman Fortenberry, thinking about, where we are in terms of an Israeli-Palestinian peace process. Last year, we saw the U.S. put forth a peace plan that included a major emphasis on economic development. And while that stalled, the initiative behind it, the need behind it, certainly has not. I explained that AJC has been a huge proponent of this, and with task forces and whatnot. Congressman, can you tell us a little bit about what you think the economic opportunities envisioned by this bill might look like, and why the business piece is so critical? Flesh out this development diplomacy concept.
Sure. Basically, agriculture and small business, to put it simply. A lot of times what we've done in terms of aid is large infrastructure projects, making assumptions that if we create the guardrails for economic activity, economies of scale, if you will, and all that's important, big infrastructure projects, then the rest will simply happen. Well, I think there's an important decided emphasis here on going smaller. It's an old book called Small is Beautiful. And in a sense that by allowing for the types of joint agricultural products, small business products, small manufacturing, you actually engage people at again, beyond the transaction level of which a lot of economic activity takes place. And then we make an assumption from there that strengthens, again, goodwill and harmony. By doing it in this manner, by having a development finance mechanism whereby equity investments can actually be leveraged for investor outcome, and then dollars can go a much farther, longer way than simply just a grant making option. And then in addition to that, those who invest actually have a stake. When you simply give money and a project ends, there is a desire to simply continue the project by seeking governmental assistance to give more money. But this is a manner in which we force multiply the limited dollars that we have using equity finance, which is at the heart of the Development Finance Corporation, to bring in more people to invest, who will then also provide, through a virtuous intentionality, a means toward survivability of business, profit of the persons involved, and then right back to the core of the message. That strengthens solidarity. So that's the fundamental ideas.
Thank you, Congresswoman. I want to build on what you said also. While we may still feel like Israeli-Palestinian peace is elusive, we've made a lot of progress in terms of normalization recently, of course. And I think that sort of changes the dynamic. So some experts have signaled that the agreements between Israel and the UAE and Bahrain may not benefit the Palestinian case. One of my AJC colleagues recently had a piece published in Newsweek called "The Road to Arab-Israeli Peace No Longer Runs Through Ramallah." How do you feel the Middle East Partnership for Peace Act fits into this larger picture now that's unfolding in the region?
Well, I appreciate that question because I wholeheartedly support the agreements reached between Israel and the UAE and Bahrain. We can't forget that peace between Israel and all of its neighbors has had the long-standing and bipartisan support of the Congress and the American people. And these agreements, frankly, didn't miraculously come together. They represent the fruits of decades of work to make Israel an undeniable reality in the Middle East, a democratic powerhouse with the resources necessary to defend itself and protect its citizens. So while we celebrate these agreements and certainly welcome other countries to join, we must not forget that Israel and the Palestinians could not be farther apart in resolving their complicated differences. The goal of a negotiated two-state solution, a democratic Jewish state of Israel and a viable democratic Palestinian state living side by side in peace, security, and mutual recognition, must remain paramount. That is why the Partnership for Peace bill is so important. It will cement U.S. support for this goal and help change the reality from the ground up.
That's very helpful to contextualize. Thank you. Congressman Fortenberry, I want to ask you, getting into sort of the nitty gritty of this legislation and in its hopeful passage in Congress. This is a rare piece of legislation. It's bipartisan, it's bicameral, and it has the support of nearly every major pro-Israel organization, from AJC to ALMEP, the Alliance for Middle East Peace, to AIPAC, to J Street. That's something pretty unique and special. But I do want to ask you sort of the harder piece of this. We found in our advocacy that it's been easier to garner Democratic support than Republican support. And I'd like to ask you first if there's a reason for this from your perspective, but also what can we be doing to best get bipartisan support around this bill, especially in the Senate now?
I think you've actually very diplomatically and skillfully given me a challenge, which is very well stated, that I perhaps need to do a little bit better job on my side of the aisle of explaining what this is. Remember, development finance itself is I don't want to divide this up between Democrats and Republicans, some Republican comments. We've done this for years in abstract concept, going back to Congressman Crowley from New York. And so there's a lot of preconditions, again, to use that word, have been laid down across a sector of communities. Look, at some point, maybe I'm going to give Ms. Lowey an idea here. She needs to write a book, and if she doesn't, I eventually will, on how politics work. It is the alignment of policy, process, and politics. You can have the best idea in the world, but if you don't understand the process or have the politics, it's not going anywhere. You can have the politics, but if you're not aligned with the process, it's not going anywhere, and on and on and on. So what we have here is the potential for an alignment of an extraordinary idea that's been around a while, the working of the system, people who have interest in this, who are outside of government, as well as internally in the process, primarily led by Ms. Lowey when she picked up the idea and invested herself fully and used the appropriations process to create a gateway for this actually to become law. But with that said, look, I don't have the fullness of an answer for you in terms of why there isn't more Republican support. We have this talked actually with Ms. Lowey as well in terms of reaching out to Senate colleagues who can make a real difference in the final negotiations here on the appropriations matter in order to make sure that this space is well understood, well protected. But again, I think the leverage point of that is the development finance component, which flows forth out of some ideas. Again, this word financing is an enigmatic word for those outside of the finance world. But basically, it's taking outside investors which leverage the initial capitalization of government funds, public funds, because it wouldn't have happened without the investment and ownership in it. There's an assumption that those investors will shepherd this project to its completion, to profitability. And then, of course, on the way, we achieve the results of solidarity in community between peoples who may not have had an opportunity to share in economic goods to this point. And that's the idea. So that's a good selling point on my side of the aisle. And Julie, that's a nice way of telling me to get busy.
That really wasn't my intention, but I'm thrilled that was the result. Thank you.
Julie, before you ask another question, I just want to follow up on my good friend, Jeff Fortenberry. First of all, when we introduced it, I called Lindsey Graham immediately, and he was so excited about it. He said he wants to be a sponsor, and I hope between my good friend and the Senate that Jeff Fortenberry, my good friend, and my good friend Lindsey Graham, I think we will reach out. I think the Israel-U.S. relationship has had strong bipartisan support in both the House and the Senate. I mean, I'm not going to list all the people in the Senate that are supportive, but when I called over there and I spoke to Lindsey Graham, he said, great idea. So I'll just keep reminding him, right, Jeff, that this is a great idea.
Exactly.
And I want to get this passed before I leave the Congress. So I have a big incentive. This is something that's very important to me. And Jeff Fortenberry has been the leader, and I know that he will be reaching out to Republican friends on the Senate side as well. So I think that this is something that everyone can support, Democrat, Republican, and the only people that don't support it probably just don't know about it, right,
Correct.
Jeff? I think that's
right.
it. We have to do a good job in the time that's left to make sure it passes the Senate. Now, the problem, the Senate moves slowly on everything. So we're going to have to keep pushing them because I want to get this done before we leave. Before we all leave for the session.
Yeah.
I like that the Congresswoman just now gave AJC an additional challenge, saying that those that aren't supporting it simply don't know about it. So we'll take that up.
I just want to say one word. I don't know how much time we have left, but I've been working with David and AJC for a very long time. So I have enormous respect for everything you do for the members, the leaders, and I have confidence we can get this done.
We have a few more minutes, I think. I want to ask maybe one or two final questions, then we'll go to some audience questions as well. Congresswoman, I can't leave what you just said hanging in terms of wanting to get this done before the end of Congress and of course before your retirement. Can you talk about what could happen next? Hopefully we'll see passage, hopefully we'll see it signed into law swiftly. But if that doesn't happen, there's going to be some changes, a new Congress, possibly a new administration. What would the impact of changes be? And what might we need to be looking out for as a contingency for the next Congress?
Well, let me make it very clear. I feel very strongly, as does my friend on the other side of the aisle, that this is essential. I've been to Israel many times. During my last trip, I met with several groups who were working on the ground, individuals who had so dedicated. I have met with Palestinians. There's a program in Eilat where both the Palestinians and the Israelis have been working together. This is not a new idea. It has been fleshed out, and Jeff Fortenberry has done such a great job with it. So I feel confident that only a very busy schedule will prevent us from getting this done. But I think between Lindsey Graham in the Senate and others in the Senate, Jeff and I Congressman Jeff Fortenberry and I can move this through, even though we're on a tight time frame. I feel good about it.
Thank you. I'm glad to hear that optimism, and know that we are your partners in fighting for that speedy process, whether it includes trying to include it in a continuing resolution or an omnibus or whatever the case may be, that we're standing by. Congressman Fortenberry, I want to ask you one final question before we go to the audience. Congresswoman Lowey talked about seeing the people-to-people partnerships on the ground, the amazing work that's been happening for years and for decades between Israelis and the Palestinians. I know in a relatively recent visit of yours to Israel, you saw some of the business cooperation and some of those examples of development diplomacy. Can you share that with us? And perhaps some of the people to people that you saw as well.
Look, unfortunately, I've not been able to be in Israel of late. So, but at the same time, let me back up, and I'll come to your American Jewish Congress and who are supporting to have Miss Lowey's marker on this. I have a high level of confidence as well that this will pass, but again, is an extraordinary idea that is building upon things that already exist, alluding to your point, but in a novel, new way that tries to break the cycle of continuing to do the same thing with an abstract notion of peace and build it out. And I think that, again, having laid down this as a clear priority, accents for the negotiations that will take place either shortly or by the end of the year about the importance of this particular piece of legislation, which also gives me a higher level of confidence versus just it being included right now as a part of a general package. She has her name on it. She has her credibility on it. She has the weight of her authority on it. She has 30 years or so of friendships and relationships in the institution. We have also called over the senator, by the way, just to make sure that I make a point of that. But if any of you want to do the same things, that is all helpful because, again, it helps educate people and shows people there is a broad constituency around this because it's a relatively novel idea building on things that already exist. To your point, Julie, there are extraordinary opportunities for cooperation. Look, people are longing. The world is screaming for meaning, okay? In the Middle East, in America, everywhere, is screaming for meaning. And how do you achieve that? Well, when there are platforms that create interdependency and therefore the possibility, again, and I'll use the word solidarity, it's harder and harder to allow some moments, some sparks, some animus, of which there are many, and I get it, deep grievances and wounds, to undo the good work is going on now, which is an economic well-being. That's the whole intent here. The more that those internet connectivity can take place, building upon certain activities that are already there and expanding them in a new creative way, it unleashes imaginative possibilities for this 21st century, where there is, I think, a desire to align the older generation's idea of dutifulness and ambition with the younger generation's idea of heart and empathy. That's the key here.
It's beautiful. Thank you. Daniel, do we have questions from the audience?
We do have a number of questions. Thank you, Julie. Our first question comes from a number of people, but we'll take one from AJC Board of Governors member Richard Cohen in Westchester, who asked Congresswoman Lowey, how can we assure that U.S. aid to the Palestinian entrepreneurs does not end up in the hands of terrorists?
This has been a challenge that we all have been facing as supporters of Israel and the U.S.-Israel relationship for a very, very long time. You and I know that there are no easy answers, Richard. And from my perspective, we have to continue to ensure that there is oversight, which there is. We have to make sure that all partners understand that this money should not be going to the terrorists. And look, I hope that in the near future, there will be new leadership of the Palestinians. I think it's very sad that the Palestinians have had such ineffective leadership throughout all the time I've been working on this issue. Abu Mazen, Saab Erekat, they, it seems, have done nothing other than to make profits to really educate and strengthen the Israel-United States relationship. So Richard, you asked a very important question, but our goal is so important. We can't just give up and say the money is going to the wrong place. We have to continue to work to make sure that groups that are doing positive things. I was in Israel just a few months ago, and I met with some of the groups that, not the group in Eilat, they had representative there, but others who are working on these relationships and Palestinians, Israelis. So whenever I meet with the good people who are doing good thing, I say to myself, There's a goal in mind, peace in the region, and hopefully the new agreement with Bahrain will make a difference.
Thank you. Our next question comes from Inez Pomerantz in New York. Congressman Fortenberry, what is the role of U.S. companies in helping to promote business diplomacy between Israeli and Palestinian companies? And will this bill allow U.S. companies to directly engage in business deals, provide mentorship or technical training?
That question, again, the whole leveraging what this new idea is, finance, is to try to seek equity investors in the public funds. To Nita Lowey's point as well, a board overseeing this and transparency. So again, this isn't the fullness of an answer, but a big part of an answer is people seek their own well-being as investors, and then can provide a sort of governance role, if you will, in ensuring the viability of a business. Look, business is about managing risk and taking some resource and intellect and drive and capability and the work of good people's hands and moving something to the marketplace. The bigger intention of business has to be, in terms of social responsibility, of making sure that those profits not only are viable for the long-term stability of the business, but are actually to the heart of the well-being, go to the heart of the well-being of the people involved. So absolutely, that would be the stated goal of having an investor class around these projects that creates the shepherding mechanism by which the businesses remain viable and actually achieve the goals of solidarity. That's the whole heart of development finance, development diplomacy, leveraging a small investment by the public sector, which would not have taken place otherwise because the risks are too high, putting up the guardrails to make sure these businesses are viable, but intending to allow the goodwill and the virtuous leadership of a business community to shepherd that to its proper ends, achieving the goals of the diplomatic foundation for peace.
Thank you. Congressman Lowey, we have a question from Lucas Mendez in Tucson, Arizona. It's asking that, can you discuss some of the specific programs that you think can be helped by this legislation, both in the people-to-people field and within the wider business community?
First of all, I do believe that providing money to independent businesses, groups of people who really want to work to strengthen the Israel-United States relationship is the answer. It's not the total answer. I can't guarantee, nor can my friend Jeffrey, that this is going to provide the avenue to permanent peace in the region. But every time I go there and I meet with Israelis and Palestinians who are working together, be it a small business or a larger business, and remember, and I'm sure Jeff has, and you may have, who asked the question, been traveling to Israel for a very, very long time. And I think that these kinds of programs, working together, getting to know each other, can make a difference, providing economic opportunity on the ground, which is so very important.
Thank you. We have time for a few more questions. Our next question comes from Avi Lancaster in Cincinnati. The Middle East Partnership for Peace Act is built upon a grander vision, an international fund for peace, which includes investment from dozens of nations. And we know that the government of the UK has publicly endorsed the project in 2018. Congressman Fortenberry, can you elaborate on this vision and why it's necessary to include other partners beyond the United States?
Well, the earlier ideas came forth from the peace initiative for Northern Ireland, where a fund was. So there was a sort of construct, if you will, that became the sort of a guiding document, if you will, for the idea. So again, that we can actually make this more international in scope, I think the idea of missions for solidarity, a refocusing. Julie, you there? Are you back?
Yeah,
Are you back,
we
Julie?
see you
Okay,
again.
sorry. All right. I think the person's name is Avi from Cincinnati. Thank you very much for the good question. Again, it's consistent with the idea that the United States has played a key role in brokering peace throughout the Middle East. Look, Egypt and Israel fought 4 wars, and in 1979, there was a historic peace accord. We tend to take that for granted because both sides have adhered to it. Sometimes it's been colder. Right now, it's more robust, but nonetheless, the peace has held. There are mechanisms. There are established precedents for being able to achieve this. It takes some sacrifice and will, and there was grave sacrifice on both sides in order to achieve that peace deal. So at the same time, the United States playing a key role still wants to be an open invitation for other international players that have a keen interest in assuring stability in the Middle East, who are friends of Israel, who want a new way forward to think about the relationship between Palestinians and Israelis, to participate in this. So that's the idea. Also, again, it's a force multiplier. If other nations want to contribute and step up, it gives us another diplomatic tool in which we can allow people to participate in this broad idea of the foundations for the roadmap for peace.
Thank you. We have a question here from Manuel Rees in Houston. The language of the Middle East Partnership for Peace Act, formerly the Partnership Fund for Peace Act, has changed since being introduced by both of you in the House earlier this year. How has that bill changed? Are there any current challenges or areas of contention surrounding the bill in its current form? Maybe we'll begin with you, Representative Lowey.
I am trying to think about changes. I've been working on this with my friend Jeff Fortenberry a long time, and before that, others have too. So I can't think of, maybe Jeff Fortenberry can, I can't think of any specific language that has been changed since then. Maybe you can tell me what's on your mind specifically.
Congresswoman, I wonder if the questioner is actually thinking of the change between when the bill only was about people to people to now when it includes both the people to people and the business development piece of it.
Well, let me say this. The reason to me that is not new, it may be new, but I've been working on programs as far back as I can remember. There was a wonderful man from Great Britain, in fact, who was investing in, maybe you remember, Julie, I can't remember his name, huge projects and business projects, so that this may have changed and morphed into a different entity, but that's what happens in legislation. As different people on the committee support it, as whether it's senators or House, it is an evolving entity. But I think the basic idea of supporting businesses and supporting people-to-people relationships is what this has been about. So maybe you can give me a clue and ask a specific change that either you like or you don't like.
Julie, can I
AJC perspective and say we like all
take
the
a little bit of
Maybe Jeff Fortenberry knows
well, yeah.
of a specific change.
Yes, there's been some massaging of the Board of Governors. That's one thing, but also the substantive change has been a bifurcation between the people to people, again, a more traditional approach, which is important and has a long, long history. It's bridging this new tool that we have in terms of foreign aid, which is development finance. I've talked a lot about that during the call. I'm excited by it. It's a new space. It's not well understood. we're all grappling with how to explain this more succinctly as I've been on this call. I hope I've made sense. But basically, it's the idea that you take a capital investment, public monies, and you spark the interest of the business community, shepherded by, again, a board of advisors, the United States Congress, about what types of projects that we'd like to see, and you let it run. The intent is for these entities to be profit-making for the people involved, the people who have invested. What that means is you create a continuity of strengthening these programs, not versus the traditional aid program, which of course has a decided place where we give a grantee money and they shepherd a project and they have to come back and apply. The business community, by using a capital investment given by the government, can leverage that using the best of the private market system to include people, to make profits, to produce products for the well-being of communities, and to create continuity beyond just the initial government investment. That's the first of small investments that can be very, very significant within the frameworks that we have set down as the guideposts for, again, Israeli-Palestinian cooperation. It's a very exciting concept, a bit novel, because government is used to granting money. But this is leveraging the best of the private market system for the intention of mutuality and solidarity, for the intention of diplomacy.
Thank you so much, Congressman. Really, to both of you, thank you for this conversation and for your leadership in this important bill. Like we've said over the course of this call, there's something in the spirit of this bill that is truly innovative. And I think it's really reflective of the spirit of both of you. Just like the bill doesn't wait for the facts on the ground that will lead to peace, the bill creates the facts on the ground that will lead to peace, in the same way that you two are working together in building this bipartisan, future-looking political reality, a reality that we at the American Jewish Committee are really proud to be a part of. As I think you could tell from the questions from the audience, our advocates around the country are keyed into this bill. We're eager to see it pass. And for any of you who are watching, who want to do more, reaching out to your representatives, to your senators, please be in touch with me. You can reach me at any time at Raymond, RAYMANJ, at AJC.org, and I would love to help further spark our advocacy around this really important bipartisan initiative. So thanks again to Congressman Fortenberry and Congresswoman Lowey. We appreciate you, we value you, and we are on your team to get this done.
Thank you very much, Julie. And AJC has always been a key partner of mine, and I look forward to continuing to work with you and Jeff Fortenberry and many private individuals out there with whom I have met throughout the years who didn't wait for government to invest. So I thank you for holding this event, and I look forward to continuing the discussion.
Thank you, Julie, as well. It's a great discussion, very important, very good to have your membership, the committee's membership on the line as well, so that we can, again, create a deepening awareness. If anybody wants to contact their own senators and representatives, please feel free to do so. This isn't just inside Congress. It also means an alignment with your perspective. And if you're willing to sacrifice and put a little bit of your own credibility, your own name behind a call to a United States Senator, that helps Chair Lowey and me shepherd this through.
Daniel, do you have departing words?
Yeah, thank you both. And thank you everyone in our global audience today for joining us. If you enjoyed this program, please consider making a donation to AJC at ajc.org/donate. Thank you again and goodbye.
Thank you.
Thank you.